medium-term policy priorities. And there's going to be a lot that's going to be discussed today. And I want to welcome not only folks that are here physically, but also online as well. I understand the hashtag is NESG Outlook 2024. We all know where we are as far as the economy is concerned and the important discussions that need to be had. So as you can see, of course, on the screen there, we've got a keynote speech that we're going to be getting from the governor of the central bank, and of course, our esteemed panelists that are going to be diving into this very, very in-depth report, very illustrative on the economy. So a whole lot that's going to get into. We're going to be having, of course, a lot of discussions and also participation as well from you out there. So if you've got questions, comments to be made on where we're going in this crucial year with this new administration and what needs to happen for Nigeria to realize that transformation, and also what does that transformation, what does it even mean? So first off, I think we do need to kick things off with the national anthem. Is everyone going to stand or? Yes, okay, everyone will stand, okay. So please rise as we take Nigeria's national anthem. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated, and we are going to jump right in and kick things off. We're going to have opening remarks. We're going to have a presentation of the macroeconomic outlook, the official launch. It's here. I have it, the physical. I almost put it up, but I'm not supposed to do that. So I don't want to kill the anticipation. So they're going to unveil it, and a whole lot more is going to happen. So I do want to first, to kick things off, call on for opening remarks, Mr. Olani Yusuf, who is the chair of the NESG. A round of applause. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I think I'm meeting quite a number of people for the first time this year. So I say compliments, and we pray for a peaceful and prosperous 2024. Your Excellencies, distinguished heads of departments, agencies, ministries of government, captains of industries, members of the international community, my colleague directors and members of the NESG community, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, both physical and those virtual. I'm honored to extend a warm welcome to each of you at the launch of the 2024 Macroeconomic Outlook of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. The year 2023 presented significant challenges marked by the rigorous implementation of a demonetization policy, widespread insecurity, and a fiercely contested general election, aggravating pre-existing macro and structural issues in the country. These challenges significantly impacted Nigeria's socio-economic landscape in 2023, and of course, our microeconomic performance. However, with the dawn of a new government, we find ourselves at a transformation juncture, ripe with political and economic opportunities to address these challenges and hopefully optimize our potential as a nation such that we can achieve our development objectives. The Russian-Ukraine crisis, disruptions to the global supply chain, the energy and food crisis in the country, and all of these heightened the economic vulnerability of the country in 2023. Global policy rate hikes also profoundly affected Nigeria, worsening our inflation and also impeding economic growth. Stringent but necessary government reforms, including the removal of the fuel subsidies and, of course, the harmonization of the exchange rate, further constrained the real sector, suppressing overall economic growth. In 2023, Nigeria experienced fragile economic growth characterized by escalating inflationary pressure, exchange rate depreciation, and fiscal constraints. With a growing population, and that's something we need to tame, these challenges continue to impede prosperity, hinder productivity growth, curtail the real sector, and of course, diminish the positive impact of growth outcomes on the overall quality of life of the average Nigerian. Despite a trade surplus, foreign capital receipts were below expectations on the external front, and the official and of course the unofficial exchange rates depreciated beyond the planning expectations of most businesses. Additionally, Nigeria's reference crude oil price declined, posing significant physical challenges as public debt also increased. Notably, the higher prices in 2023 resulted in a decline in the real purchasing power of the minimum wage, and according to the World Bank, an estimated 4 million people were pushed into poverty last year. So the poor became poorer with inflation. While the government has implemented some interventions, at the NESG we believe more effort is required, and urgently to reverse the country's weak and non-inclusive growth narrative. Building on the NESG Next 29 theme, which was Pathways for Sustainable Economic Transformation and Inclusion, this year's macroeconomic outlook underscores the medium-term policy priorities to expedite the transformation of the Nigerian economy and to enhance the socio-economic well-being of Nigerians. The economic transformation roadmap outlined 3 phases that we would like the government to consider. And these phases of policy sequencing, focusing on monetary stability, effective fiscal management, local content improvement, domestic productivity improvement, incentives to attract private sector investment, and human, social, and natural capital development. As we delve into these policy priorities in the next few hours, we must emphasize the pivotal role of a robust policy environment in laying the foundation for sustainable macroeconomic stability and economic transformation. We recognize the current administration's efforts in stabilizing the economy, but given the depth of the problems, we believe more still needs to be done, and quickly too. We must not relent to build the Nigeria of our dreams. I therefore implore every stakeholder to rise to the occasion, seize the opportunity, and contribute our own quota in rebuilding our economy. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group stands ready to continue its collaborative efforts with both the national and subnational governments to achieve our transformation goals. A concerted and a coordinated approach and an effective policy implementation will propel Nigeria forward to a more resilient, modern, prosperous, and inclusive future. We trust that this macroeconomic outlook launch event will not only stimulate discussions here and also online, but will more importantly serve as a catalyst for decisive actions to be taken by both the public and the private sectors. I therefore extend my wishes for a fruitful deliberation. I thank you all for your presence. I thank you all for being part of this launch, and I pray that may God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
Please keep the applause going for Mr. Ni Yusuf, who, of course, is the chair of the NESG. And sir, thank you for mentioning Nigeria's population and how it needs to be tamed. That's not something a lot of people talk about, but maybe we'll get into it today. We're now going to jump into an outlook presentation on this report with respect to the NESG's macroeconomic outlook for 2024. So I want to call to the stage the Chief Economist and Head of Research and Development at the NESG, Dr. Olusegun Omisaki. You're very welcome, sir. Round of applause, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a very fantastic snapshot into the state of the Nigerian economy. And I hope that at the end of this presentation, which is aimed to stimulate discussions and to set a deeper context, we will be able to understand why transformation, rather than just reformation, is the best way for us to go. We set out this pace last year during our economic summit. The idea was to move beyond the usual narratives of playing with the current economic issues, but looking into the major structural foundational issues that will help us to move beyond now and then move into a better state. After the COVID-19, we all know how different countries struggled with their economic prosperity. Some got it right, some are still struggling, and many are still below the previous benchmark performance. The case of Nigeria is very interesting because we all know that if we need to just spend 1 minute in discussing what we need to do or what economic transformation stands for, then we just say economic transformation is about beating the odds, identifying the odds, and beating them. That is the summary of economic transformation. In this case, in the case of Nigeria, we have our odds in a very unique state. This is a macroeconomic instability heat map, which shows the current temperature of the economy. Or better still, which shows the current BP of the economy. As we all know that when the BP, the blood pressure, remains unstable and is increasing every day, then something is about to happen. We hope that at the end of this presentation, our advocacy at the NESG, in collaboration with what the government is doing now, will help us normalize this BP at a level that will be sustainable for the prosperity of the nation. When you look at it from the trade balance, our net foreign investment, our fiscal balances, our public debts, inflation, exchange rate, interest rate, every major macroeconomic indicators are showing the sign that things are not going well. And we all know about this. So we're not going to waste time talking about each one of them as it were, but we will just make sure that we'll talk more on what we need to do going forward. In my presentation, I'll quickly go through this analysis in 3 forms. I will speak briefly on the state of the Nigerian economy, what we had in 2023. The idea is for us to have a better understanding of where we're coming from and then understand the problem we need to face, the challenges that we need to face, and how we need to come up strong this year and years to come. I will also speak to our proposed transformation roadmap, what it means, and the implication for our medium-term policy priorities. And lastly, look at some of the outlook. What do we see going forward this year? Now, if we want to look at what happened 2023, we know that virtually everybody in Nigeria knows the basic information about the Nigerian economy, whether you are whether at the micro level or the macro level. But there are critically 5 charts that will help us explain that better and efficiently. The first one is the fact that our economic growth momentum declined further. After the COVID-19, Nigerian economy has been struggling with growth. Last year, the struggle continues while we recorded weaker growth. For the first 3 quarters of 2023, the average growth reveals 2.5%. This growth is not just about how high or low we are doing, but it's about also who or which sectors are contributing to this growth. If you look at the major classifications of sectors, we could see that services remains the main driver of this growth, and the oil sector remains in the negative territory. This is not a good picture. When we look further as to the dynamics of this growth, the contributors, we are able to identify three players, key players among the sectors. The first are the growth drivers. The second group are the stagnators. And the third one are the draggers. If you look at the column, the first column talks about the contributions of these sectors to GDP growth. The second column talks about the sectoral growth rate among these sectors. And the last column talks about the contribution of these sectors to GDP, their shares in GDP. When you look at the growth drivers, you will notice, if we compare that with what we've been having before, that the growth drivers are shrinking. Now we are having majorly three of them playing the role of driving the Nigerian economy. We used to have more of them there. Most of them are now what we call stagnators. Now the growth is weak. Not only that they have weak growth, they are also the major contributor to job creation, poverty reduction, which is very important in talking about transformation. And so if they need to contribute growth to, if they need to contribute to poverty reduction and job creation, they need to grow. But now they are stagnating, and there are many of them. And their total contribution to GDP is around 52%. So this is the challenge. A much interesting issue here is the fact that our oil and gas sector remains in the negative territory, though we could recognize the fact that this is getting better compared to what we've been having before. Now, the basis of transformation is to play our best team. The current AFCON also reveals why playing your best team is important in winning games. We have some countries that are CBC with experimenting with players. So they change they change the team too often, and they are back at home now. And we have some that are playing their best team, like Senegal and the rest, and they are seeing the game. So we need to pull out our best sectors out of being stagnators to growth drivers. And that is the foundation of our dream of transformation. Other interesting issue that we can see in 2023 is inflation. We all know this. The pressure is becoming so high that on the average, we had 24.5%. And as at December, we had as high as 28.9%, which we've never experienced in the past for the past 18 years. But we have some good news also. The government implemented the removal of subsidy and also the harmonization of foreign forex. And so we have the opportunity of raking in more revenue from the side of government budgets. And so for 11 months in 2023, we have about 14 trillion naira. That also impacts on the size of our budget for the year. And that's a very good news in the sense of what we're talking into. We also have another interesting development in 2023. We are doing better off in terms of our external trade position, but we need to strengthen the movement. We need to make it better than what we have today. So I'm setting this context to show that the journey of transformation is going to be difficult, but if we understand our hearts, we'll play the game better. Now, what does transformation look like for a country like Nigeria? Transformation, in a way, is just about how we reallocate our resources. In economics, there are different theoretical explanations but everything boils down to being efficient with your resources. How do we move factors of productions from the less productive sectors to the high value sectors, the sectors that would also impact job creation, reduce poverty, leads to innovations, and then bring us hope among the Committee of Nations. So it's still the same way of saying playing our best team at this time. Now, what we proposed in our report is a roadmap that not only are we speaking to the transformation, the need for transformation, but we also know that how we get it done matters. And the time frame that we use also matters. So it's all about, the roadmap is all about identifying the role of the government, the monetary and the fiscal authorities in developing a time-bound strategy that will show to us clear targets and then the outcomes of this transformation. Now let's look at it broadly. We look at this framework. This shows that transformation journey is a function of time. No one gets transformed suddenly. So we've proposed not more than 2 years for us to achieve great stabilization. Now, when we say 2 years, we don't really mean we need to wait for 2 years, but we mean that even in the next 2 quarters, we can do a lot in stabilizing our economy. And we can keep doing that in making sure that we have a better stabilization. And then from 2025 to 2026, a great deal of consolidation is needed. We shouldn't be interested in having the macro indicators behaving well, but we should take this opportunity to look at the factors that are creating the deviations. Because this is not all about bringing down, raise it up. It's about making sure that they all communicate together and the deviations are minimal. And the last stage is for us to start our long-term role, long-term vision of making the nation one of the best in the world. And this is the acceleration phase. As interesting and simple as this might be, the role of policy implementation is very key. The reflection points highlight the importance of policy implementation. If the implementation is great, we can quicken the process. If the implementation is weak, we elongate them. And so the discussions today are focused on how do we make sure that these policy implementations are smart and efficient so that we achieve each of the stage quicker than we anticipate. The first phase is stabilization. And what do we mean by stabilization? The goal of stabilization among countries anywhere is to strengthen the fiscal and monetary framework to minimize the volatility. Stabilization does not necessarily mean in this time reducing, as I said, inflation, this and that. Yes, these are very critical, but it means that we should try as much as possible to minimize how often and how strong these indicators deviate from the fundamentals. The idea is the fact that when we do this, we will be able to have a more improved and efficient sectors. Productivity will increase. We will be able to attract investments and then promote growth that we all dream of. This is where we are today. The essence of stabilization is to see how these indicators, macro indicators, are playing the game for growth. If they play well, we'll see the result in our growth. If they don't, then we will see it. What if these stabilization factors or targets, the macroeconomic indicators, are well tamed in such a way that they pull our stagnators to join the growth drivers? That is the result of stabilization. Stabilization in this context is not all about just stopping at reducing inflation and then every other macro indicators, but going beyond that and making sure that they reflect, the gains are reflecting in the quality of growth. And so this is what we have today. Let's look at this deeper. If we present what stabilization means within the context of our productive sectors, this is how we play for now. This is what we call Nigeria's growth impact quadrant. We have 4 quadrants. We have the first column talking to the range of low growth. The second column is the range of high growth. We also have the second row, or the first row and second row talks to level of impact. So when you look at this game, you notice that we have most of our sectors, it's either they are growing at a low rate, or they are making low impact. So for instance, the leader here, agriculture, trade, are experiencing currently low growth, and indeed they have moderate impact. So for instance, agric has huge number of employment, but weak productivity and remuneration. So it's low, the impact is low on job creation, quality job creation. So agric currently contributes to working poor population we have in Nigeria. When you look at what happens at a low growth and low impact, this is the worst case scenario. And we have, unfortunately, many sectors playing in this game. These sectors don't grow, and they don't even have impact on the broader economic goals. The third one, on the high growth and low impact. These are sectors that are doing fantastically well when it comes to how they grow, but they don't make impact. They grow, but they have weak capacity to employ more people. Their job capacity, the capacity to employ more people in that sector is limited, even though they are growing. So on the overall impact on transformation, it's useless. Now, what happens at the 4th quadrant? Why are we not playing our game here? Why don't we have high growth sectors that are making great impacts? That is the essence, the outlook of any stabilization. As I said, the impact, the essence is to see us playing this game. What will be the result of the stabilization phase? This is the result. Let's pull more sectors from the low growth, low impact range to more of high growth and high impact range. What if we have our trade, our Greek, our manufacturing sectors, not just having high growth, but also making great impact? Think about this. You have a Greek sector that has high value addition, that has a lot of innovations that are driven by people who are not carrying hoes and cutlasses. Think about the impacts on inflation rates. Think about the impacts on poverty reduction. Think about the impacts on employment. That is what high growth, high impact means in terms of stabilization phase. What do we mean when we say we need to consolidate this? This is the second phase. As a matter of fact, our proposal shows that we need just 1 year for this phase if we have done our job quite well in the previous phase. The idea here is to consolidate, is to identify the gains of pulling our sectors into high-performing, high growth, and high impact, and making sure that the fundamentals that are driving this is solidified. Also, the idea is to say we then lay this as the foundation for our acceleration phase. Laying this for foundation means now we have a better economic structure. Now we have a better macro stability situation. Now we have investors who are interested in the Nigerian economy. Now we can set our leg on our bigger goal, which happens to be wanting to be among the League of Nations in years to come. Now, this is how to go about it. We will have recorded enough improvement in our agri sector, or mostly sectors that we have pulled down to the high growth and high impact, to the extent that we wouldn't just be interested in their growth rates or how they make impact. But now we look at them from the perspective of deepening, where we have them leading the job creation agenda, where we have them leading the innovation agenda, and we'll have them leading the trade agenda, especially in Africa. And the last phase, in this case, is the acceleration goal, which is to mean that we then focus on our long-term goal. Last year, the NESG presented the vision and the ambition of Nigeria being a 4 trillion economy by 2030. That looks ambitious, but this is the foundation. If we get it right in previous phases, we can beat the odds clearly. And so this phase then talks about achieving growth, not just about growth, but actualizing our natural resources to drive our collective purpose as a nation. And the first part to start with is understanding our natural capital. We are blessed tremendously with our natural capital. But if we don't understand the purpose or where we are going or the vision, we'll neglect them. So the first phase is to understand them and harness this capital in a way that it leads to built capitals. These are infrastructure, these are physical capitals that will aid trade and businesses in Nigeria. And then we have that impacting on human capital. The chairman has referenced the population impact of our transformation agenda. This is where we can harness what we have to make sure that we move to where we are going. And ultimately, the idea is to have a society that can be proud of having a social capital where everybody believes that this is our nation, this is our country, and less of Japa syndrome will be happening when we have achieved this. What will the success look like? We all know that. I know we have different indicators for what success will look like if we can achieve this. It will impact our GDP size. It will impact our economic structure. It will impact our employment and our poverty and inequality situations. These are the current situations in Nigeria. We can move from less than $2,000 per capita income to more than $10,000 per capita income if we play the game very well. And lastly, before I take my seat, I want us to look at what we expect to happen this year. What do we see happening in this year that will start as the basis of our stabilization? Well, we know stabilizing an economy is not that an easy job. We all know that. But we can start from somewhere. There are different projections as to how our economic trajectory will be in 2023 and 2024, excuse me. We have projected 3.5%, being driven by the current policy implementations and experimentations that we've been having since 2023. We believe that some of these policies will have some benefits that will also help us achieve better this year than what we had last year. But ultimately, this is still a very weak growth. 3.5 cannot drive an economy. 3.5 cannot stabilize an economy. 3.5 cannot lead an economy into a transformation stage. But we can do that if we play the game very well, if the policy implementations are efficient enough, we can do far beyond this. Secondly, we expect inflation to take a very critical stage in 2024. In 2023, 2021, 2022, we had serious issues with inflation. We had, on the average in 2023, 24.5% inflation rate. We are forecasting by the end of the year, we should be able to do 21.5. The reason is because the drivers of inflation in Nigeria are mostly stubborn. And this is a hard reality. And the implementations of different implementations also could lead to more inflation, but we expect a coordination. We expect a targeted reform at core issues that are leading to inflationary pressure to work on stabilizing it. So we're expecting 21.5, but we can still do better than this. And lastly, our projection for unemployment and poverty, exchange rate, and external reserves are here. We believe that while unemployment and poverty are structural issues, but we can still do better than what we've been doing so far. If we get the first phase, especially the stabilization phase, right, and the exchange rate also, we see a more stability, even though we believe that at the end of the year, we're still going to be doing an official exchange rate that is hovering around 900 900 naira to US dollar, but we expect more stability. I think what we need now is more stability. And lastly, we believe that we'll have more growth in our external reserves. These are the key points that we think we can look into and then discuss how we can achieve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please keep the applause going. Dr. Olusegun Michakin, thank you so much for that very robust presentation there. And as you said, 3.5% is not enough. I think we barely did 3% in 2022. I do want to recognize some attendance online. Again, we have, of course, 2024 Macroeconomic Outlook at the NESG. The Director General of the Debt Management Office, Patience Oniha, I want to recognize her online. Also representative from the Bureau of Statistics, the NBS, also online as well. Alhaji Umar, Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Fiscal Commission, also in attendance online. And we also have Dr. Tokpe Fashola, who, of course, is the Special Advisor, Economic Affairs to the President, who is also online as well. All right, we are going to, it's the moment we've been waiting for. We're going to actually unveil the reports, and I want to call to the stage again for the official launching of the NESG Macroeconomic Outlook for 2024, Mr. Olani Yusuf, the chair of the NESG. And please, you should be joined by some other. Are you going to do this alone? Solo? No, you're going to do this with the rest. Okay.
Directors.
All right, fantastic. And the directors as well. Here you go.
Yeah. Thank you. So the CEO, yeah, what's the plan?
So it's going to be first, and then we then have.
Then call it as a join.
some-
Okay. Right. So okay. All right. On behalf of the board and directors of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, but more importantly, the economic and research team and the research fellows, gives me great pleasure to formally launch this macroeconomic outlook. It's a total of 65 pages, and in it you will have various policy recommendations around the three phases: the stabilization phase, the consolidation phase, and the acceleration phase. So what Dr. Mishakin has presented is really just the intro, but you have 65 additional pages that speaks to key details of the three phases. And I hope that, and so for those who want copy, there's physical copy, but more importantly, we also have it online. So if you go to www.nesggroup/outlook, I'm here to launch. I'm still explaining. She's in more hurry than I am. Right, so for those who want to get a copy online, you can go to our website, www.nesggroup/outlook 2024, and you'll have it there. And for those in the room, you can do a QR code and scan that, and also you will have it. And so, for the use of the government and private sector and economists, the 2024 Macroeconomic Outlook of the NESG. Thank you. I thought there would be confettis and. All right, thanks. So let me call our former chairman and our director to please join. Mazi, please. FOP. And Mrs. Adetayo. Yes, everybody wants a copy. How many persons do we need? Where's the lady? Yinka? How many persons do we need there? No, Frank, I asked for all directors. Okay, just 1 minute for Mr. Alford. Yeah, 4-4. We are balanced. 4-4. But I can confirm there are more than 4 female directors. Yeah. I'm going to ensure we are not, it's not upside down, right? All right. You can let me know when we need to stop. Yeah. Shagun, look forward. All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Keep the applause going, please. This is a major report, and there's a whole lot to be discussed. Thank you so much for launching that report. All right, now we're going to get into a segment of the proceedings that I very much have been looking forward to, which is our keynote speech, which is going to be coming online. We are going to be hearing from Mr. Yemi Cardozo, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. I think we're going to prep, he's going to be on the screen, yes, to our technical team. And the chairs being arranged, of course, for our panel discussion that is going to follow. So, of course, our first Monetary Policy Committee meeting hopefully should be happening on February the 26th and the 27th. So looking forward to that. And yes, so I believe we should be having the governor, if you want to please welcome him in a round of applause. He should be appearing on the screen any moment now. Governor Cardozo, over to you, sir. Any moment now, he should be on. Again, where was our last benchmark rate? I think it was 18.75%. And of course, as you've seen with the inflation projections, 21.4, yeah, for 2024, yeah. So we're expecting to have a more hawkish central bank as far as the meetings are concerned. And okay, yeah, so the technical team is putting together the governor of the central bank, Yemi Cardozo, who will be joining us to give a very anticipated, maybe he'll give us some clues as to what to expect at the next MPC meeting. I particularly wonder how we can get single-digit interest rates in Nigeria when you've got inflation and the benchmark rates in double digits. It's a challenge that we have to face, especially when it comes to getting loans for small businesses and individuals. Are we ready, technical team? I'm running out of things to say. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think they're still working on it. And the central bank governor, Dr. Yemi Cardozo, is going to be coming on any minute now. And after that, we're going to have... we're doing very well on time, though. They have to commend the NESG. Every time they put one of these forums together, the NESG is always bang on time. So we are... going to be running through according to this guy. Okay, there he is. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause for Mr. Yemi Cardozo, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. You're welcome, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, esteemed guests. It is with great pleasure that I address you today at the launch of the NESG 2024 Macroeconomic Outlook Report. I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to deliver the keynote address on this significant occasion. The importance of this launch cannot be overstated, considering the incredible progress made by the organization in various areas such as research outputs, program execution, seminars, conferences, and workshops, all aimed at facilitating the formulation and implementation of socio-economic reform programs to foster the growth and transformation of the Nigerian economy. It is crucial to emphasize that the NESG has become one of the most pivotal platforms for public-private dialogue in our country. I extend my sincere appreciation to the chairman and the leadership, the members of the Macroeconomic Outlook Report Committee, and the dedicated staff of the NESG for their relentless efforts. I sensed the urgency in the chairman's tone when I received the invitation letter. The acknowledgement of the challenges facing the economy and the resistance to proposed solutions by various stakeholders were evident. However, I want to assure you that we are now at a turning point, and the bold reforms being undertaken across different segments of the economy, while initially challenging, are ultimately directed towards addressing these challenges in a sustainable manner. I am confident that we are already witnessing positive outcomes, and these will undoubtedly become more apparent in the near future. The dedicated and relentless efforts being made are certain to bring about significant and positive changes for our economy. Indeed, recent reports from international rating agencies such as Fitch, Moody's, and commendations from multilateral banks like the World Bank reflect this, with upgrade to Nigeria's ratings from stable to positive. These reports acknowledge the possible reversal of the deterioration in the country's fiscal and external position due to the authorities' reform efforts. While noting the painful adjustments, they will identify a direction of travel that will unlock the much-needed growth and development for our economy in the medium to long term. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am under no illusion that these commendations are reducing the price of rice in the market or the cost of foreign exchange that you need for your businesses or to pay your children's school fees. These concerns will be addressed shortly. Let me first express our views at the Central Bank of Nigeria regarding the outlook for 2024. Global outlook. The global economy is currently grappling with persistent challenges, including inflation and subdued growth prospects. Despite GDP growth outperforming expectations in 2023, it is projected to further moderate in 2024 due to tightened financial conditions, sluggish trade expansion, and reduced business and consumer confidence. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, anticipates a mild slowdown in global economic growth to 2.9% in 2024, down from 3% growth observed in 2023, with Asia driving the majority of the projected global growth in 2024, similar to the previous year. Esteemed participants, the near-term outlook is clouded by downside risks, including heightened geopolitical tensions, such as the Israel-Hamas conflict and the ongoing Russian-Ukraine war. Broader escalation of conflicts could disrupt energy markets, trade routes, and financial markets, leading to a slowdown in growth and increased inflationary pressures. Additionally, rising trade barriers, protectionist policies, and global value chain restructuring could exacerbate uncertainties in global trade. In this challenging landscape, key policy priorities involve ensuring durable inflation reduction, addressing fiscal pressures, and fostering sustainable and inclusive growth. The global monetary policy environment is expected to remain restrictive until sustained inflation reduction becomes evident. Governments must grapple with rising fiscal pressures, necessitating credible medium-term fiscal frameworks to effectively manage debt burdens. Domestic outlook. The projections for the nation's economy paint an optimistic trajectory as the federal government of Nigeria anticipates real GDP growth of 3.76% in 2024, slightly surpassing the estimated 3.75% for 2023. This optimism is underpinned by the implementation of key government reforms set to shape the economic landscape. Foremost among the factors contributing to this positive outlook is the expectation of improved crude oil prices and production, highlighting the crucial role the oil industry is expected to play in driving economic growth. Furthermore, the optimistic scenario receives support from businesses' perception of the overall macroeconomy for the first half of 2024, as indicated by the December 2023 Business Expectations Report. Specifically, the positive outlook for industry, services, agriculture and mining, electricity, gas and water supply subsectors reflects the potential effect of market-based reforms through private investors and SMEs-led growth that will contribute to business improvement and confidence. Government reforms in the mining and energy subsectors are expected to serve as a catalyst for growth and development. While the potential for growth exists in 2024, each sector may encounter unique challenges and opportunities. The services sector is expected to maintain its dominance, driven by mobile money adoption, increased government partnerships, and expanded digital lending offerings. Continued digitalization and government support for financial inclusion initiatives are poised to drive growth in the fintech sector in 2024. The agriculture sector is expected to grow at a faster pace due to improved productivity and efficiency resulting from the projected decline in inflation, access to finance, and infrastructure investments. Anticipated growth in the industry sector is tied to the expected increase in crude oil production, arising from improved surveillance and infrastructure, better maintenance of plants, and increased investments in the oil sector. The anticipated moderation in pump prices of premium motor spirits, PMS, due to the expected operational status of the country's key government and private-owned refineries in 2024 is a pivotal factor in the economic equation. The economic stabilization or reduction in fuel costs is poised to have far-reaching implications across various sectors, contributing significantly to overall economic efficiency and resilience. Inflationary pressures are expected to decline in 2024 due to the CBN's inflation targeting policy, which aims to rein in inflation to 21.4%. This will be aided by improved agricultural productivity and the easing of global supply chain pressures, benefiting businesses by boosting consumer confidence and purchasing power. The CBN's adoption of the inflation targeting framework involves clear communication, use of monetary policy instruments, and collaboration with fiscal authorities to achieve price stability, fostering market confidence, and positively influencing consumer behavior. The outlook for decreasing inflation in 2024 will have a profound impact on businesses, providing a more predictable cost environment and potentially leading to lowered policy rates, stimulating investment, fueling growth, and creating job opportunities. Additionally, the bank has reverted to the conventional monetary policy approach with a focus on attaining price stability, which fosters sustainable economic growth for Nigeria. Our initiatives on FX, I'm pleased to note our collaboration with the Ministry of Finance and the NNPCL to ensure that all FX inflows are returned to the central bank. This coordinated effort will greatly enhance the bank's FX flows and contribute to the accretion of reserves. The expected stability in the foreign exchange market for 2024 can be attributed to the reduction in petroleum products imports and the recent implementation of a market-determined exchange rate policy by the Central Bank of Nigeria. This reform is designed to streamline and unify multiple exchange rates, fostering transparency and reducing opportunities for arbitrage. The resulting consistent and stable exchange rate will not only boost investor confidence, but also attract foreign investment, elevating Nigeria's appeal to global investors. We are implementing a comprehensive strategy to improve liquidity in our FX markets in the short, medium, and long term. Our focus is on addressing fundamental issues that have hindered the effective operation of our markets over the years. Upholding the integrity of financial markets is crucial for building confidence. With the completion of an independent forensic review, we are addressing the backlog of valid FX transactions, and we remain steadfast in our commitment to decisively address any infractions and abuses. In our efforts to stabilize the exchange rate, it is imperative that we prioritize transparency and create a market environment that enables the fair determination of exchange rates, ensuring stability for businesses and individuals alike. We believe that the Naira is currently undervalued, and coupled with coordinated measures on the fiscal side, we will expedite genuine price discovery in the near term. This coordinated approach will contribute to a more balanced and stable exchange rate. NESG macroeconomic outlook. It is important to highlight that NESG's macroeconomic outlook report for 2024, being launched today, emphasizes the necessity of economic transformation under the central theme, Economic Transformation Roadmap, Medium-Term Policy Priorities. This theme underscores the requirement for a clearly outlined roadmap comprising distinct yet interconnected phases and essential policy recommendations. This resonates with me, as we have just last week launched a new 5-year strategy for the Central Bank of Nigeria for the period 2024 to 2028 that provides a clear roadmap for achieving our mandates anchored on the following themes. 1, price stability and monetary policy effectiveness. 2, robust and resilient financial systems. 3, governance, compliance, and advisory to government. These form the pillars around which all our actions and activities will revolve, enabling us to deliver on our mission to ensure monetary, price, and financial system stability as a catalyst for inclusive growth and sustainable economic development. The work has already started, internally within the bank and across the banking industry, and we are committed to rebuilding an institution that is trusted and respected and promoting confidence in the economy. Additionally, the NESG Economic Transformation Roadmap delineates 3 distinct phases: stabilization, consolidation, and acceleration, with sequential steps and policy priorities aimed at fostering robust and sustainable economic transformation. The identification of potential inflection points is crucial for strategic decision-making. This is also commendable, as I believe we are, as a nation, at the point of stabilization. If the goals of the stabilization phase are achieved, they will have a significant and immediate impact. This phase is focused on stabilizing macroeconomic indicators such as inflation rate, GDP growth, fiscal balance, and exchange rate, which are essential for steering the country towards economic recovery and laying the groundwork for long-term economic transformation. Before I conclude, I would like to say a few words on the catalytic and transformational role of economic summit groups such as this. I'm proud to have been pioneer of economic summits for subnational governments in Nigeria through the Lagos Economic Summit, NBETI, in year 2000. 20 years later, I was invited back to co-chair the 20th anniversary of NBETI in Lagos, and we all on reflection agreed that NBETI had been a positive tool for the economic transformation of the world's 6th largest mega city. Indeed, a good number of the transformative projects that are birthed today in Lagos came to life from the NBETI Economic Summit. On reflection, we note that part of the reason for NBETI's success was accountability. All communiques were agreed between the various stakeholders, published in all the dailies, and judiciously monitored until the next summit, where those with responsibility were held to account. This helped NBETI in no small way from avoiding the pitfall of being viewed as a mere talk shop. So I encourage NESG to continue with the hard work. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, under my leadership, I assure you that we'll be the reliable partner in fostering economic growth. We will vigorously address the various structural impediments to development, tackling institutional deficiencies, restoring corporate governance, strengthening regulations, and implementing prudent policies. Investors, both local and foreign, as well as other stakeholders, can rest assured that the economy will transition to a new state of stability in the short to medium term as we recalibrate our policy toolkits and implement far-reaching measures. As we move from the stabilization to consolidation and acceleration phases outlined in the report, I hope to count on the NESG as partners in the journey ahead. Once again, I would like to express my gratitude to the Nigeria Economic Summit Group for providing this very important macroeconomic outlook report. Thank you all for your attention.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, keep the applause going for the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Yemi Cardoso. Thank you so much, sir, for that address. And honestly, our panel discussion could focus just on what he said. There were so many points that were made there. But the NSG said rules to stick to our questions. All right, so that's what we're going to do. At least I'll try. I'll do my best. So I've been very much looking forward to this. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll be giving them each a round of applause as we call them to the stage. Let me call up first Dr. Dirisu Osasoye, who is the Director of Policy Innovation Center at the NESG. You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, also calling to the stage, Dr. Alex Seinart, who is the Nigeria lead economist at the World Bank Group. You're welcome, sir. And also Dr. Christian Ebeke, who is a Nigeria country representative at the International Monetary Fund. Thank you so much. And also online, we should have a technical team, Dr. Mohammed Shagagi, who is the former Vice Chair, Presidential Economic Advisory Council. He should be online as well. All right, as I said, we are bang on time, so we've got a good solid 50, 55 minutes to talk about quite a number of things here. Dr. Ebeke, let me begin with you. I have to add, Dr. Ebeke is Cameroonian, and they had an exciting match yesterday at the African Nations Cup, a thrilling match with Ghana, and they faced Nigeria in the round of 16. So may the best team win. So thank you so much for joining us. We're talking football in the in the room there. But aside from football, Dr. Ebeke, the stabilization, it's been a core message with respect to, okay, yes, Dr. Sagagi is online. We can see him there. You're welcome, sir. Dr. Ebeke, stabilization has been a key part of the NESG's report here that we've been going through. In your view, what are the key structural issues that Nigeria should be focused on? There's so many, but see how many you can narrow down for us. Do ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I think, the question that you're asking is a very important one. Nigeria is facing a lot of important challenges, and the way we have to think about, structural reforms in an environment where the country faces important policy trade-offs is a new thinking, right? So you have to think about the reforms that will have a positive impact on the economy, taking into account existing policy trade-offs. So it's no longer the traditional structural reform agenda, where you want to lift productivity growth in the medium term and you start deploying labor market reform, product market reform. You now have to prioritize the reform that will have three main characteristics. So one, the reform that will jumpstart growth very fast, because you need this growth momentum in order to sustain additional reform given the social challenges that the population faces. So you need reform with speed, right? Reform that will have an impact pretty fast and jumpstart growth. Then you have to sequence this reform pretty well, right? So you have to bundle them in packages so that you increase or you maximize the impact that they will have. So the sequencing, the second S, is very important. And then you also have to make sure that the reform that you're going to put in place will be interacting with the policy mix that is consistent with macroeconomic stabilization, right? So this is also very important, how this reform will interact with a policy mix that unfortunately has to be tighter, given the challenges that Nigeria faces: high inflation, high borrowing costs, high interest, debt service to revenue ratio. So the good news is that the IMF looked into these things in October in one of our staff discussion notes, and we were focusing on structural reforms that, matter when policy trade-offs are high. And we identify a couple of reforms that I think resonate very well for Nigeria. First is governance, right? When you combine governance reform together with trade reforms and together with business deregulation, what we found in that report is that the combination of these three reforms brings growth very, very early. So it's no longer that you have to wait for 4 years, because usually policymakers don't want to do reform because the benefits are uncertain, or at least the benefit will materialize after a couple of years, while the cost is immediate on the population. But when you bundle these three reforms that I mentioned, we found that in many, many developing countries, when they did it, those reforms were powerful in first jump-starting growth very early, but also helping to alleviate the policy trade-off, reducing inflation and this type of thing. So for Nigeria, I think the report mentioned accurately the issue of agriculture is very important. Again, it's not just because agriculture, this sector has a lot of employment potential, but it's also linked to the conjunctural issues of inflation. If you boost agricultural productivity, you're not only employment, but you're also addressing macro imbalances in the term of inflation. And then you have the issue of trade, right? So it's still a lot of issues in Nigeria for importers and exporters. The regulation burden in this sector is pretty difficult or strong, and you have a lot of documentation you have to to do. And on the governance, it's very important to continue the effort that the government is doing. Currently, Nigeria is on the gray list of the in AML-CFT issues. So it's very important to continue strengthening this credibility and so on and so forth. So not to be very long, I think there must be a fundamental rethinking in the way we prioritize reforms to ensure that the reform selection that we think about is consistent with the short-term needs to pave the way for a long-term structural transformation as mentioned by the NESG.
Thank you so much. So actually, the CBN governor finished a little early. So I just want to follow up on the agriculture. The continued discussion around agriculture and its potential. I just wanted to pick your brain on what needs to be done to boost agriculture, because our yield per hectare is very low. There is a lot of talk about the need to transition to mechanized agriculture, but the machines that you're going to use, you have to import them because we don't build them here. And then in advanced economies, agriculture is, in some of them, is less than like 1-2% of GDP. So do you really believe that that Nigeria has enough time to boost the productivity to required levels for agriculture?
My position is Nigeria does not even have time. You know, this is a critical issue, not only, as I mentioned, because of the employment potential of the sector, not because agriculture is going to lift supply and also reduce inflation down the road. You know, food is more than 50% of the CPI basket, so it's very important, but more so because of climate change, right? Nigeria just doesn't have time to wait and see what's going on. It must be a strong commitment to boost agriculture in a way that is going to be resilient to climate change. And this goes into the area of innovation, right? You have to have a climate resilient seeds. You have to make sure that irrigation is right there to help the farmers. So, you know, this is urgent, and I think that this administration is committed, and this is a very, very important area that we look at because it's becoming macro-critical in this country.
Thank you so much. Let me go online to Dr. Mohamed Shagagi, who, of course, is a former vice chair, Presidential Economic Advisory Council. Dr. Shagagi, I hope you can hear me clearly. Dr. Omishokin, who, of course, is the chief economist and head of research at NESG, in his presentation, he showed us the phases for transformation: stabilization, consolidation, and acceleration. What do you think needs to be done to achieve the necessary steps to get through those phases for Nigeria? Dr. Shagari.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Before my intervention on this report itself, and I think it has a bearing on the answers. I think this report presents a fair assessment. The prognosis is a wake-up call to all of us. I'm certain that we are going to have a growth of GDP. Population growth is estimated at 3.2%. In whatever answers we provide. But the second thing is that in spite of this, I think this intervention is timely. Philosophers say, for instance, that it is during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light. In 2015, 2016, and 2019, we had two recessions. They were our dark moments, obviously. Unfortunately, the administration failed to seize that opportunity to search for the light. But most importantly, moderator, I would like to mention that we have to manage our expectations. A, on what can be achieved, and B, on how soon those can be achieved, for two reasons. Reason number one is that, you know, the underlying conditions are very tough and very overwhelming. The number of people below the poverty line, the number of people who are multidimensionally poor, the number of people who are unemployed, and all the inflationary pressures, the foreign exchange instability, and so on and so forth. But the second one is also that the key determinants for economic transformation are virtually absent today in this country. One of these, of course, is the auspicious and strong fiscal position that we have. So that leads me to answer your question. What do we think we'll do in order to achieve this, what is outlined in each of these stages? Now, overall, I think we have to define what our approach should be from 2024 to, say, the end of this, the acceleration phase. And if I were in a position to outline that position, I would say that we have to transition from a regime of passive interventionism into something that is more open, even if guided market system. And I think my brother from the IMF had alluded to this kind of system. Over time, we'll see that interventionist policies in this country, meddlesomeness in the economy, have led to where we are today. A nation that is struggling with a very weak economy, with widespread poverty and unemployment, and so on and so forth. It is true that in the past, in the 90s, in the 60s and 70s, protection had supported Nigeria to grow, not only the economy, but especially the industrial sector. But if Nigeria aspires to realize its potential, to be a global player, to lead the continent, we must endeavor to open the economy and leverage private capital, private skills, and private sector technology. This is the path that Nigeria must take. Now, but I want to caution that unrestrained openness of the economy can be as detrimental to us as blanket protectionism. And this is perhaps where I would differ from the position of the gentleman from the IMF. I am a fanatic when it comes to market reforms, but I remain skeptical about the ability of the market system to determine appropriate prices and to allocate resources fairly and equitably. So I think that we must guide the market system from the transition phase to the stabilization phase, to consolidation and to acceleration. We have to guide the market, but that guidance must be judicious and must be responsible. And therefore, I think it must seek to create that balance, strike that balance, and unbridled, unrestrained openness in the economic system. Whether you move from the stabilization phase to the consolidation, each group, obviously there are certain things that need to be done. We need to do two things, especially in whichever phase we are. We have to and deliver them timely and efficiently. Clarity, policy coherence, and consistency. This is what will build trust between us and foreign and domestic investors. Investment is about trust. Investment is about what people think you can do to deliver. For them to make money out of their investments. We have to walk the talk. And walking the talk here means that we don't just pronounce that we are friendly with the private sector. We have to break government monopoly in key sectors of the economy. in refineries, in aviation, in other sectors. We have to give the private sector greater role in funding and management of these sectors. We have to initiate reforms in the MDS, in all the public sector institutions that facilitate investment in this country. Of course, in the stabilization phase, you have mentioned that it is key to deal with inflation and exchange rate instability. And of course, we have to address the challenge of public sector funding. So I think fundamentally, once you agree on the approach, these are the first steps that you will take in order to move within each phase, but also to move from one phase into the next. I think I can stop here for.
Thank you so much. Very, very, very robust there. And okay, Alex Steiner, Dr. Sagagi does touch on a very important point, particularly the two extremes, where you've got a government that is, meddles too much in the markets versus a government that just throws things open. So based on that, we want to come to you on the exchange rates, which the governor of the central bank did touch on in his keynote address. The fuel subsidies have been removed. There's been a move to reform the exchange rate, but still, I mean, when the government came in, it was from 450 to about 750. As of yesterday, on the NAFEM window, it's 887. Parallel market is about 1,300. So what do you think needs to be done to stabilize the exchange rate?
Sure. Thank you. Firstly, just to say thanks so much for the opportunity to be involved in this event for ourselves at the World Bank. It's a great honor, and what a fantastic event in terms of all the energy and the great information that's been shared so much already. So really appreciate it. On the exchange rate, gosh, the real expert is probably the man from the IMF sitting next to me. So perhaps we can redirect the question later. But I'll do my best. Look, I mean, I think it's a very central question to the perspective of stabilization, which is the starting point of the report we're discussing today. I think rightly so. It also resonates with the latest report that we at the World Bank put out on the economy just about a month ago, which was entitled "Turning the Corner." This NESG report has, the idea of a roadmap to transformation. So our perspective is maybe, that we're on the start of this road to transformation. We're turning that sort of first corner, and it's been a difficult ride so far. Yeah. We heard this morning how 2023 was a tough year. I think it's worth, just kind of standing back and recognizing the distance that's already been traveled. Yeah, the tough decisions that have been taken. As the governor CBN was mentioning, it's hard to reorient policy to the extent that has already been done. And then the question becomes, if you've made those hard decisions and embarked on a journey in a new direction, how do you consolidate and bed that down in such a way that you achieve the gains you're looking for from having made those difficult calls? And that's where, again, in terms of really achieving stabilization, whether it's the volatility in the exchange rate that you mentioned or other aspects of the macroeconomy, there's a lot more work, the reality is, that needs to be done. And I think it becomes important to also make that a really social conversation, and something that events like this one are critical to, because we need to be explaining to people why all of this is worth it, and what the roadmap is in terms of the long-term destination. So we're at a really interesting moment, I think, and critical moment for Nigeria as we enter into 2024. I guess I can't resist putting on the slightly more sort of technical economics hat in answer to your question. So to be more concrete about it, how can the exchange rate sort of be stabilized? I think the key risk we see to manage is that the exchange rate is the price of the naira relative to other currencies, and the prices of things in this economy are increasing very quickly at the moment, the inflation story that we've also focused on. And so it's natural that the relative value of the naira is coming under pressure. That's exacerbated in a situation where globally we have quite tight dollar liquidity. So in order to safeguard the benefits of having made this major currency adjustment and moving to a new flexible system, I think really the key thing is for central bank as the critical agent, but also other stakeholders and players, to just be laser focused on this inflation challenge and to bring about that price stability, which will then in turn support the value of and the stability in the naira. So it was great to hear the focus expressed on that by the central bank governor. Obviously, it's a huge challenge with many dimensions, but it starts with the policy commitment and with the additional tightening that Christian did mention as well.
Alex, thank you so much for that. I do want to stick on the exchange rate, but let me bring in Dr. Osasi, Executive Director at the Policy Innovation Center at the NESG. On socioeconomic matters, the report has pointed out that productivity has been weak. There hasn't been enough economic growth to impact the socioeconomic metrics, unemployment, and so on and so forth. What do you think needs to be done? And I want everyone to chime in on the exchange rate, because there was some news yesterday, and I talked about with folks at the NSG before we began. BDCs are asking that the parallel market rates be officially published with the official rates side by side. So, Dr. Sassi, if you want to chime in on that, now I do want Dr. Beke and Dr. Shagagi to jump in. Some people know where I'm going with this, but yes, socioeconomic factors, and then if you want to jump in on the exchange rate as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. It was really great to see all the work that has gone into putting the outlook together. I will just start by saying that right now there are no easy answers. So it's not like a quick fix solution to a very complex problem that has been, we've seen this coming, for a while. So it's not, there's no like quick solution. But I think that there are a few fundamentals, just to avoid a situation where we come back and have these conversations over and over again. So I think one is to begin to view conversations about economic transformation as conversations that have to happen at the same time with inclusive development, not after. Because sometimes we have all these conversations, we put down the projections, they look good on paper, but you see, when you go out to the streets, how do you want the common man, for example, to listen to even a simplified version of these conversations and then have hope that, these projections will put food on my table and hopefully I don't die before I begin to see the benefits of socioeconomic development that the government has been speaking about. So one of the ways to do this is we're thinking about short-term, medium-term, and long-term priorities for economic transformation. What does this also mean for development? And what that means is that in taking tough decisions, these decisions are now driven by two key factors. One, it's underpinned by the need to grow the economy, but the other one is underpinned by the principle of equity. We need to drive down inequalities in society. And so, for example, in prioritizing sectors, and that's something that was discussed in the report, we now think about sectors that can scale employment. Because when we're talking about human capital development, we're looking at issues relating to labor productivity rates, literacy, access to health services, life expectancy. So these are big ticket problems. They don't have easy answers. But when we integrate the conversation, then we're saying that the investments in the agricultural sector are critical, not just because it's high impact or low impact, but they are critical because we have scale to think about. So currently the median age in terms of the population in Nigeria is 18 years old. 70% of the population are below 35. So when we keep having conversations about demographic dividends, we need to understand that we cannot afford high youth unemployment rates. We cannot afford to leave a whole segment of the economy behind. We cannot afford not to have conversations about vulnerable groups in the same room where we're talking about socio-economic development. And I'll just say the reason why this is expensive is because the development that comes as a result of leaving that conversations out of the room will not be sustainable, because we will be foregoing the opportunities to look long term and think about what an inclusive Nigeria would be like. So in bringing these conversations home, we need to begin to think about sectors to prioritize. We need to think about what's happening to trade. We need to think about what's happening to agriculture. We need to go back to our human capital indices and ask how many children are currently dropping out of school because we have challenges with paying school fees or challenges with retaining children in school, and what the impact will be in 3-4 years when we may have been able to maybe improve on GDP, reduce inflation, but the productive segment of the society, you know, have gone out of school. So the conversations, I believe, have been happening in silos. I think that there's a lot more potential to bring this together and have those conversations now, so that as we're thinking about economic development, we're carefully, deliberately, intentionally prioritizing opportunities to ensure that the most vulnerable are not left behind and they make it to the next 4 to 8 years to see the impact of this sort of development.
Thank you. I do want to follow up on something that the chairman said in his opening remarks. He said Nigeria's population needs to be tamed. All right. You mentioned school fees. If I have only one child versus 7 of them, it's easier to pay school fees for 1 versus 7. So what? And I remember it was the Goodluck Jonathan administration that tried to do a 1 or 2 child policy and it backfired. How do we address that? Because if your population continues to rise, you are putting more pressure on your infrastructure and your welfare system. There's more kids to feed, more kids to put in school, more kids dropping out. So are we brave? If we're talking about, and I quoted, I was actually taking notes. You mentioned tough decisions. Can the tough decision be made to tell Nigerians to not reproduce like rabbits and have so many kids? So how do you think that can be addressed?
Okay, thank you. So we're talking about fertility rates now. It's unfortunately a more complex conversation. And the reason why it's more complex is because we now look at issues relating to access to information, social cultural factors, social norms around, wealth for you in the urban area may be having 2, 3, 4 cars and having a house. Okay, but conversations about even thinking around wealth in rural settings may start with the number of children that you have. And as difficult as it is, conversations around fertility are always, laced with a lot of sociocultural conversations. So there are 2 ways to think about this. One is to first say, we already have a population problem. How do we harness the potential for the current population? And then continue the conversations about long-term issues relating to improving contraceptive prevalence rates, addressing sociocultural barriers to access to family planning, improving access to healthcare services, improving literacy rates. So you see, these conversations are intertwined. The more exposed a woman is to education, the more likely she is to begin to think about, for example, how a large family size will limit her capacity to participate in the labor market. So the more we have these conversations, but it's not just about conversations, it's rethinking that strategy. And that's why it goes back to my initial point that conversations about economic development must happen at the same time. So in bringing this integrated conversation together, we're looking at harnessing the demography we already have and addressing issues, increasing investments in family planning, increasing investments in healthcare services, ensuring that we increase rural penetration for information, digital access, digital technology, because this is the way we reach the people who need to hear this information. Then male engagement, bringing men together and having these conversations about the difficulties, and then also debiasing those philosophies around having, a large family size would eventually improve productivity. If we're not scaling agriculture, which is the perception, around having large family sizes, what are these children going to be doing? So these are all the conversations that need to happen at the same time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Ebeke, let me come back to you. My next question for you is on the handshake between the fiscal and monetary policy. But I do want to hear your thoughts on the exchange rates and whether or not it makes sense to have a published parallel market rates. But yes, handshake between fiscal monetary policy and then exchange rate, you want to take a swing at it.
Yeah, thank you, Rotus. I think this handshake is very much linked to what's going to happen to the exchange rate, right? When you look at the history, you look at experiences of countries in Africa and in Latin America that managed to close the FX premium, the gap between the official rate and the parallel rate, what you see is that tremendous amount of fiscal coordination and monetary policy coordination was put in place. So you had substantial contraction in broad money growth. You had, substantial reduction in fiscal deficit and debt stabilization. Both coordination, so creating this tighter policy mix, was important in order to address domestic imbalances. Because the situation is the following. If you have excess Naira, if you have an excess demand for dollars coming from the fact that you have excess Naira in circulation, this will structurally lead to pressure on the Naira in the FX market. So part of the job, and I think this is what the central bank governor Cardozo was alluding to, you have to make sure that you implement this inflation targeting in a credible manner, and that will automatically lead you to a tighter monetary policy stance at the current juncture. Because inflation is high, there is no way monetary policy can be loose at this particular moment in time. So you need the central bank, and I think it is, focusing very much on inflation. At the same time, you must also see effort on the fiscal side not to work at cross purposes with monetary policy. And I think, again, the minister is focusing on that. You see a lot of discussion in terms of generating revenues. So this is part of the fiscal consolidation effort that we see. It's not so much about cutting expenditure. It's more about how to raise revenues at this particular moment in Nigeria, not only to stabilize the debt, but also to address urgent developing needs. So a tighter policy stance is needed at this particular moment. Why? Because if you look at Naira pressures, you can decompose these pressures into three main categories, right? Three main factors. One is cyclical, and this is what I was talking about, the fact that you have excess Naira in the system. The second one is structural. The market is new, right? This reform, the June reform, is a bold reform. I mean, you needed a lot of courage in order to let the Naira depreciate like that, in a country where, Naira has been quite stable for a long time. So you needed a lot of courage from the administration and the central bank to let it go like that. So this market is still new. The market is still within this price discovery mode. Market participants are still learning how to transact in an orderly fashion, in a better fashion. So those structural factors affecting the market, because the market is new, is a little bit shallow, are also explaining why the trade Naira dollar is at times, seems a little bit volatile. And then you have this interaction between the cyclical factor and structural factors that create uncertainty. Okay, so you also have uncertainty. I'm not sure when I'm sitting here that, the parallel rate is definitely, the ultimate rate. At some point we may think about a fair Naira rate that is probably in between what we see now and what we see in this parallel rate. But it's very difficult while you're still in the transition phase to talk about what is a fair value and what we're seeing, right? Transparency is important in a nascent market. Transparency is key when, the central bank is embarking on inflation targeting. So this decision or this call by BDCs to publish their rates, I mean, it's up to the administration to see if this makes sense to them. But I think overall, the topic of transparency, making sure that everybody understand what is going on, the crux of the matter is if you manage to tighten policies and you manage at the same time to address the FX supply issues, meaning, you know, you have organic generation of FX through exports growth, through oil export, through foreign portfolio investment coming into your country, then this combination of tighter policies and organic FX generation will help the Naira. And the Naira will converge to a fairer value that at this point is very difficult to know exactly what this fair value is.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Shagage, I hope you can still hear us, so if you're still with us. I wanted to ask you about the key obstacles that are facing Nigeria's ability to achieve this transformative agenda. And if you want to touch on the FX matter, that's you're free to do so as well. Dr. Shagage. Okay, Dr. Okay.
Yes, I think many of us would. Yes, yes, can you hear me? Yeah, I think many of us would dodge your question on the exchange rate, and I think for obvious reasons. This is something that has defied solutions, but I think perhaps by the end of the day, we should be able to get some solution, some kind of thing that will satisfy the audience. But meanwhile, you know, talking about the obstacles, you know, when I read this document, I said to myself that the NESG has done well, but then if you look back, we have had so many policy documents, so many, you know, development agenda, transformation agenda. Think back, remember needs, remember the 7-point agenda, remember the transformation agenda, remember the 2020 vision, 2020-10, 2020, the ERGP, the ESP, and all this, you know, development, you know, policy agenda. And why is it that we have, you know, brilliant ideas, and yet, you know, it's like nothing ever changes in this country? So let me limit, you know, these difficulties, these obstacles have been with us for quite some time, but let me just limit it to the last 10 years or so. I think the first obstacle, the first difficulty we faced, especially in the previous regime, was the slow phase of reforms and the consequent weak growth in this country. And we've noticed that our response to, or policymakers' response to economic crisis have almost always been slow throughout this period. We had what I would call the "it will fizzle out" strategy, that policymakers paid no attention to these difficulties, to these obstacles, to these challenges, because in their thinking, the challenges will just fizzle out. My friend Ayo Teriba once said that economic recovery, and this is true, economic recovery in this country is usually premised on luck rather than hard work or planned economic reforms. So this is the first obstacle. If a policymaker simply wishes that things will change or that the challenges will fizzle out, then we are in trouble. The second problem is one of the things I mentioned. You know, we had this pervasive role in the economy by the government, and there is this failure by the government to break its own monopoly. So on the one hand, we tell the private sector that a business-friendly environment and that the private sector is our friend, but yet we do not walk the talk. And obviously that would be, you know, a huge obstacle, you know, by the private sector that is expected to take risk and invest capital. Number three, what we faced throughout that period the price distortions that were occasioned by exchange rate management policy. We didn't have, we hope that we have gone beyond that now, but it was an obstacle. Policy uncertainty and inconsistency has posed, serious problem and significant risk to investment and output growth. Like I mentioned earlier on, remember, programs we had from the structural adjustment program in the 1980s, in 20, and so on and so forth. So policy inconsistency settles investors. They would never want to invest where they cannot predict what happens next year, in 2 years, or in 5 years. A big obstacle has always been with us, and that is our failure to diversify the revenue sources of this economy, of Nigeria. We have depended on the oil sector for our foreign exchange earnings, for our domestic revenues, and for current account stability. And what has happened, given the nature of the oil sector, revenue from that sector, the fiscal system has become uncertain, unpredictable, and is disruptive of development. It doesn't provide for orderly development. It's very precarious. So no matter the intention, the good intention of the government, this kind of fiscal system is not good for the implementation of any transformation agenda. And finally, I would like to mention, my sister there had mentioned this, the youth bulge, demographics. Ordinarily, you say this is a selling point, 220 million people, but it's turning out to be a disaster. If you look at the growth of the economy in the last say 11 years, let's say take from 12, 13 years, take from 2012 to date, average growth was what? About 2.4% of GDP. But then average growth of population growth was about 2.6%. In fact, when I read your report yesterday, I realized that it's even more than 2.6%. It's about 3.2%. So you have an average growth over about 11 years, a period of 11 years, average growth of 2.4%, and a population growth of 2.6 or 3%. So you tell me, how much have we gained over this period of time? So this, I think, are some of the obstacles. And of course, as a consequence of that, a consequence of some of these policies, you have a very, you have an economy that is not competitive at all. So you can't sell outside, and you continue to rely on the oil sector for your revenues. And then you have all this, a combination of all these sectors, making it extremely difficult for you to make any headway. So this, I think, are the obstacles. Now, on this socio-economic condition that my sister started mentioning, I think 3 things are important. The state of socio-economic conditions of a country are determined by 3 broad things: natural and human resources, which we have, the capacity, the technology, the skills, and all the financial resources that are needed to provide these social services. But what is also fundamental, what is important, are the socio-economic policies to harness these resources. And this is, I think, where the problem lies in this country. A number of things that have been responsible over time, for the socio-economic condition, the poor economic conditions. First of all, growth performance has been extremely poor. Even when it was good, when the going was good, I think during the Jonathan period, we had difficulty in making inclusive growth. The fiscal space that I mentioned is very narrow, it's unstable. Inefficiency in resource use, low spending in social services sectors, especially education and health. If you combine what is spent by the federal government and the state governments, not what is budgeted for, but what is actually spent, is very small. I think the World Bank came up with this figure for federal government in 2021, 2022. Total spending on education was less than 0.5%. On health, it was 0.4% of GDP. Social services, I think 0.1 or something percent. But ironically, what we spent like on subsidy was about 1.2% of GDP. So spending on social services is extremely low. And then, of course, the demographic challenge. So these are the things that have combined to make it extremely difficult for us to provide the kind of development, transformation that Nigerians expect and Nigerians demand. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Where does the time go? We've got like 5 minutes left. It's amazing. Dr. Sagagi talked about our lack of an ability, and Dr. Sinat, I'm coming back to you now very quickly. He talked about the inability to diversify the income streams of the country and that we rely too much on oil. So I want to ask you about our trade surplus, which was pointed out in the report. The report says that the trade surplus does not transfer over to our reserves. So how do we fix that going forward? As briefly as we can.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's true that in the recent period we've seen this continued decline in reserves until at least very recently, which is somewhat surprising in the context of since 2021 generally good, favorable oil prices, good enough in fact to more than outweigh the production pressures in oil that we all know has been the case. I do think that the removal of the petrol subsidy should make a big difference there, because we know that the amount of petrol being imported in was pretty dramatically inflated as a result of the arbitrage opportunity created by the subsidy and smuggling to other countries. So we'll see some relief there. We'll see what the impact is of the increased domestic production of refined product is. So, I think we can point to some of these specific factors and have an explanation for why we've seen some pressure there in recent years and grounds, to expect some stabilization and improvement going forward. But aside from those specific factors, another perhaps helpful perspective to have on it is you can identify that there are different imbalances that may be going on in the economy, right? And I wouldn't recommend sort of targeting a given level of the trade balance as a policy target, because it reflects many different factors. There can be good reasons, in fact, to have a reduced trade balance. Maybe you're importing lots of useful capital goods that are going to help your economy grow, for example. But I think you can see the pattern in recent years as symptomatic of an economy that was running into significant both domestic and external imbalances. And now, as a result of the change in policy settings that we've been discussing this morning, I think there's good prospects for those imbalances to be addressed, and as a result, for overall economic performance to pick up in a really pronounced way, as long as there's the needed follow through, to really make sure that they continue to be addressed on the monetary, on the fiscal. Taking advantage of the new flexibility in the exchange rate creates many different opportunities.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Sasse, let me come to you and I think wrap up here. Although we're going to be taking questions from our audience, I believe online and physically here as well. You can direct your questions towards the panelists. The digital divide, ICT, and its ability to provide growth. I wanted you to speak on that. With this stat that blew my mind from the NCC, the Communications Commission, 60% of Nigerians are, as far as mobile devices, are on 2G. I think was about 10% or so on 3, about 20 or so less than that on 4. 5G is 0.8%, right? Dr. Sagagi's connection has been filtering in and out. So this, the CBN governor mentioned it in his address that we want to, boost the digital, infrastructure and provide that for financial inclusion and so on and so forth. Is it a real thing when you look at the realities in terms of where the rural folks are and so on and so forth. What's your take on, and the report pointed it out, I should point to that as well, this digital infrastructure being able to deliver growth? Where are we?
Thank you. So the potential is huge for, we have a large population. The world has moved, far ahead in scaling digital technology, both for education, for everything we've talked about. So for all the human capital indices, whether it's education, health, financial inclusion, improving access to resources, to information, so there's the potential. Even, we came out of COVID and we saw a lot of innovation happen just because people could take advantage of digital platforms for learning, for doing business, for delivering goods and services. So that potential is huge. When we're currently working, doing some work in a rural area, looking at how, for example, you can scale financial inclusion by improving digital access for smallholder farmers. But it's very interesting to see that even at that level, the women are not waiting. They are struggling to innovate at their level. So we've spoken to women who are thinking about ways of improving their yield, using geolocation to locate, ripe plantain in the forest. So the potential, even from what we see, is immense. But we need the infrastructural support, like you talked about 2G and all that, in terms of improving digital access, laying that infrastructure, having more conversations about how to think about bringing, digital public goods to the doorsteps of those who need them. And I think that this is where the conversation about inclusive development should start from. What tools do we need to ensure that we're not just thinking about development from traditional perspectives, but ensuring that, we have a population problem. Until we begin to address that, we have to be thinking at scale. And that's where the potential for using digital technology or digital transformation opportunities come in Nigeria.
Thank you so much. All right, now I'm going to opening it up to our audience. If you have a question, just raise your hand. And I think we're also getting some comments online as well. And you're free to direct your questions to any one of our panelists. Lord knows I have a whole lot more questions on what's being said. Okay, I'm getting questions here. So, well, Mr. Cardozo is no longer here, but this is also for Dr. Ebeke, so I would have come to you anyway if we're still going round robin. But question for Mr. Cardozo and Dr. Ebeke. There seems to be a lot of opacity around Nigeria with IMF special drawing rights as related to COVID funds. What's happened to those funds? I don't know if that should be for Kristalina Gorgieva, but maybe you can try answering that question.
Yeah, it's a very surprising question, because I think there was intense and immense communication around the support that the international organization like the IMF, support that they provided during the COVID pandemic. There was this, what we call the general allocation of SDR, where we increased basically the amount of basically capital that countries have at the IMF, their position in terms of special drawing rights. And that created an opportunity for countries to actually absorb this capital increase and really help their emergency programs to fight the pandemic. So this was a general allocation that we provided. It was a substantial increase. I think it was the second time that in the history of the IMF that we did it. And all countries benefited from it, right? So this is one. And then there was, at the request of the Nigerian authorities, there was what we call the Rapid Financing Instrument, where we helped Nigeria with emergency financing during the COVID period in 2020. And Nigeria got around $3 billion emergency financing for that. And that financing was used to protect the balance of payment at the time, and by the fiscal authorities and everyone to really fight the pandemic. There have been audits of the way these funds were used. The IMF is about to publish in a few days a report on our assessment of Nigeria capacity to repay this loan. Nigeria is still a strong economy, and Nigeria is a member of the IMF, and as we did for many other countries, we provided financing at the request of the government back then in 2020. So just to be short, I am very surprised by the question. Maybe the gentleman or the lady should just go on Google and type Nigeria IMF, and there will be a page where you will see the history of all our engagement with Nigeria, and all these numbers are there and our reports are there. It's free to be downloaded. So it's very easy, Nigeria IMF COVID, and you will get everything that you need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is on agriculture. I think this is directed to Dr. Sasui, since she was just talking about agriculture, because I didn't read it directly, but it's on agriculture. So, low access to finance has impeded agricultural production, created food insufficiency, and raised inflation on agricultural produce and food items. What effort needs to be put in place to increase funding of agricultural financial institutions that will in turn improve access to low-cost financing for farmers? I would think that's for you, because I think came in right as you were talking about agriculture. So what do you think?
Okay, thank you. So as part of the conversations that we've been having, one important thing, like we've said, is prioritize these sectors because they can scale. But even when we have funding, even when we've seen some schemes in the past, directed at improving access to finance for smallholder farmers, a lot of other things need to be in place. So funding has to be linked to innovation to ensure that we can deliver better with the sort of agricultural practices that speak to improving crop yield, improving, think about climate smart agriculture, seeds, climate resilient seeds. So the conversations about funding are important, and it comes to looking at taking agriculture as part of the bigger ecosystem around social investments and social protection for the most vulnerable, improving financing for that. And as we improve financing, thinking about creating new approaches of thinking around scaling agricultural production to ensure that we are able to prioritize those who need it most, but a little can go a lot more when we bring innovation into the room.
Thank you so much for that. For Dr. Seinert, I think this one is on oil production. Was it you or Dr. Becker that talked about revenues? But either way, it's directed at you. The 2024 budget calls for 1.78 million barrels per day of oil production. However, Nigeria only did about 1.4 in the third quarter of 2023. And the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Oil, has said that Nigeria can possibly get to 2 million if you include condensates. And then the OPEC quota is 1.5. Can Nigeria successfully increase our oil production in order to bring in more revenue?
Thanks. So we don't have a sharply different view on oil production prospects in the near term. I think our fiscal projections are predicated on close to 1.5 million barrels a day. Obviously, if there's upside to that, that would be welcome news in terms of what it brings. But let me also say that it's well and good to focus on production as one aspect of the equation, but there are many other important aspects. One of them, of course, is the price, over which Nigeria doesn't have control. We'll see what happens, and we're seeing a lot of volatility there as a result of international factors. Quantity times price gives you your sort of oil revenue writ large. And then there's also the question of the piping through which those revenues flow ultimately into the government's coffers and through the VAC process and so on. And there, I think there's an important role for all stakeholders. I know the production numbers get a lot of attention, but just to follow the process through and interrogate and examine, how how Nigeria's revenues from oil ultimately flowing into the budget and supporting renewed stabilization in the fiscal situation. Because again, a huge sacrifice and decision that was made last year around removing the petrol subsidy is only going to bear fruit if those savings, which are savings that come through net oil revenues, ultimately reinforce the fiscal situation, stabilize things, and then over the long term begin to contribute to more and more fiscal space so that we can see more spending to tackle some of these development needs for a demographic dividend, for example, for some of the youth issues that you've mentioned. So I take the importance of the question, but I'd almost argue to kind of zoom out from it a little bit more. And I think, many different stakeholders have a role to play there.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Sagagi, this is, okay, so yeah, I figured that there would be a question on this for you, Dr. Sagagi, if you're still online and hopefully can hear us. How do we determine how much interference, that's government interference with market operators, are, quote, just enough? And at what level does interference amount to meddlesomeness? Dr. Sagagi, if you can hear us, I want to take that question. I really do like these questions.
Yes, yeah. Well, I wish I could measure that using, figures and numbers, but I think he should understand exactly what I mean by, pervasive interference and also meddlesomeness. Let's understand the context. The context is this, that there are certain actions that are best performed by perhaps by the market, but then, like I said, the market also needs to be guided. The question is whether you would allow the market to determine an appropriate exchange rate, or whether you have a managed, so in other words, whether you have a floating exchange rate, totally floating exchange rate, or whether you want Mr. Cardoso to manage that exchange rate. And that is what I mean by, so obviously I can't determine when it is too much and when it is too little, but you should be able to determine exactly based on the interests of the economy and the behavior of the participants in the market. I mean, we're talking about the BDCs now being participating in the determination of exchange rate. We know how much damage they have done to the economy, and therefore intervening and regulating their activities, that's market regulation. I mean, that's not not intervening would be like unrestrained openness, but intervening to determine their behavior in the interest of the economy. That's regulated openness. And like I've always said, that you can allow your sectors or activities in the economy to face foreign competition without protection. And that's, unrestrained openness. But we know that given the structural defects of the economy, you need sometimes to nurture them and then allow them to compete with outside. And that's protection. And that's, that's regulated openness. Your target is set, but you know that within a period of time, say between 2024 to 2030, given certain conditions in the economy, within or outside the economy, that these sectors need to be protected. So I think, this should be obvious to, economists and development economists, that there are certain situations in which you need to intervene in order to protect your own interest in the economy. I hope he's satisfied with this answer.
He or she should be. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Ebeke. In fact, I think I want to throw this to the whole panel. The informal economy. I don't know I want to get your thoughts on, I guess, the talk around trying to formalize it. Our Rise News was in Davos. We covered the World Economic Forum. I came back and I had a flat tire. I drove out and there was a gentleman on the side of the road. The colloquial term is a vulcanizer, and he pumped my tire. I paid him and I left. He doesn't pay, well, to my knowledge, he doesn't pay any taxes officially to the government, but I'm sure there are informal players that collect money from him. So, Dr. Vike, and I guess I'll throw it to Alex Seinert and Dr. Susan as well. How do we formalize the informal economy and generate revenue from there? How do you think that needs to be tackled?
I think, again, what is beautiful about economics is that, you see experimentation from different countries in the world, and you can learn from them, and you can see what you can take back home based on their characteristics and similarities. So the experience has shown that you don't formalize by force. Okay, you can't use police to formalize the informal sector. So it's incentive-based. You have to provide the right incentive for them to accept to come to the formal sector and then face the regulations, face taxes, face the scrutiny, etc. Right? So what are the things that are holding back those small businesses, to move from the informal sector to the formal sector? And in many countries, they will think, or their perception is that tax pressure on their activity will be too high, and they cannot break even, and they cannot make any profit. So you have to look closely at the issue of multiple noisy tax rates that are in the system, how you streamline it, how you create a business environment that is conducive to firm growth, because most of the time, most of the informal companies are micro companies, and the goal for a country like Nigeria is really to create like mid-sized SMEs that are not only competing domestically, but also manage to export in the sub-region. I mean, Nigeria is a powerful economy when you look at the potential and how smart people are here. So I think create the right incentive is important, but people also look at taxation and their willingness to pay additional taxes is conditional on how you are using these tax revenues and you spend, right? So if you look at all these micro studies, using Afrobarometers for many, many countries, what you see is that, the willingness to pay more taxes depend on the quality of public expenditure. If you can prove to people that when I collect these naira, I'm gonna build a better road quality, I'm gonna fix the power issue, I'm gonna do this and that, then you will create, this momentum, right? And this policy acceptance that, they can pay more because they see also the tangible result, right? So this is very important to create those incentives. And those incentives are skill, taxation, business environment, simplification of procedures, different things, right? And policy intervention there should not be out of the equation. Sometimes we believe that, industrial policies should not be used at all. I think our position at the IMF is the state can intervene when there are market failures, but you have to identify those market failures first, make sure that these are real market failures before you can have a state intervention. So the bottom line is don't use force, use incentive, and work in a sustained manner to bring these people into the formal economy where they will have better security. I'm 100% confident.
Thank you so much for that. Alexander, you want to jump in on the informal sector? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, I'll jump in, but very little to add to Christian's comprehensive answer other than, maybe it's helpful to look at it not as a problem per se, but rather just as an inevitable consequence of the fact that, Nigeria is growing by 3 million, more than 3 million entrants into the workforce and job market every year, but only a fraction of those people are able to find jobs, in sort of formal sector firms. So there's lots of dynamism and lots of potential in the informal sector, but it's also just a product of the tremendous urgent need for this economy just to produce more high quality, good jobs in, across all sectors and various opportunities. And, there I can't help thinking that I don't know if it's a low-hanging fruit, because I realize it's very contentious in Nigeria, and there are different views, and it can also create losers. But just the opportunities from international trade, including fairly new ones that have been opened up by AFCFTA in the region. Nigeria, given its size, given its dynamism, such a natural place for international companies, you'd think, to want to come and locate, to produce into Africa, which is getting a lot of attention, which is a growing market. You had some complete blockages to that in the past, like the overvalued exchange rate, for example, is basically going to make it impossible to export. Now we're well on the way to taking care of that problem. Other levers and mechanisms that policymakers may have as well, but it I think requires more of a consensus than perhaps exists now, that Nigeria can be, I want to say sort of on the offensive when it comes to trade, and has huge potential, rather than thinking in perhaps more sort of defensive protectionist terms, which has been the case quite a lot in the past.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sase, I mean, again, I'm coming back to agriculture, but there's a sizable participation in the informal sector in agriculture. So what's your take on that matter in the informal sector?
Okay, so the harnessing the opportunities to formalize the informal sector would be critical for a country like Nigeria, because that's where you have, a large proportion of the population. But first of all, it has to be evidence-based, and it can't be driven, first of all, by a vision for revenue. It should be driven more by a vision to see small businesses, informal businesses, evolve into businesses that can now employ people. I'll give a very quick example. So many years ago, there was an empowerment program we're involved in, and there was this young lady, from Edo State, who said, "Oh no, I don't want to learn how to sew and all that, or make clothes. I want to learn how to do process gari at a bigger scale, because I have a lot of sisters and brothers back at home that I can empower." And this was in Lagos. So we finished, and she said, "Set me up in Benin." So we set her up in Edo State. And a few years down the line, she had a big factory. She had 10, 15 workers. I mean, this was a young girl who was trafficked to Lagos for prostitution. But so the impact, thinking about just creating that opportunity for her. So what's the evidence around how much do these people earn? You also don't want a situation where you take someone from earning 10 naira a day to now earning 1 naira because you've brought in 20, 30 taxes from where you stand, pay for the tray, pay for the stick, and everything. So, but if that is the vision, we now think about what capacities are needed for informal players, in terms of financial literacy, financial inclusion. So almost having a strategic plan that we can take into policy and say, okay, we project that in the next 3 to 4 years, and like has been said, it's not something that happens by force. It's something that people begin to see the potential, the opportunity to grow their businesses. If it's agriculture, what are the potentials for value chain pathways? So I don't have to produce something in the village and not take that to the city to sell and get profit. I'm opening a bank account because I see the potential to save, to increase revenue, to buy productive assets 2 to 3 years the line. So you create a vision for bringing informal sector players into the formal sector. They buy that vision. And because they buy the vision, they are eager to come and enlist their businesses, because they see that they can also have that collective vision that in a few years down the line, they are growing to become stronger businesses that are now resilient to all the issues around climate shocks, because they have better access to finance, they have better access to loans, and they have better revenue, and then they pay taxes.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Sasgage, I have to bring you in on this as well. What are your thoughts on the formalizing the informal sector, if you can hear us?
Well, I'm not sure whether the conversation should be on formalizing the informal sector. First of all, there is no trust between the informal sector and the government. The moment you do, and I think she mentioned this, she let the cat out of the bag. The moment you start, is all about taxation and taxation and taxation. And that is why they will never trust the government. I thought the conversation should be around improving the productivity of the MSMEs in the system. First of all, improve productivity. And when we all, we've been talking about, generating more employment and blah, 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 blah. I do not think that that is the major problem. I think the major problem is that you improve the productivity of those that are already employed within the MSMEs. We all know that they produce nearly 60% of output. We know that they employ a sizable number of people from the labor force. And so what we need is to put in place policies and measures that would ensure that they are productive, more productive than they are today. That would open the space for the conversation between the informal sector and the government. And one of the things, for instance, what they always complain about is that they constitute nearly 60 or 70% of the private sector in this country. But when you talk about the private sector, you only focus on the organized private sector. And that's only a small portion of that private sector. So what measures would you put in place to integrate them, to be able to, and you can do that without necessarily formalizing them in the sense that we know, like asking them to go and register with the CAC, asking them to, file returns at the end of the year. Remember, majority of them cannot even, do not have that capacity to do this kind of thing. So I think, in my own view, is, making them, put, first of all, recognizing them for policy. And then secondly, putting in place measures that would improve their productivity. And they will naturally integrate into the wider private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. We've only got 4 minutes left. So I guess my final question to the panel, just 30 seconds or a minute, is there enough time for this administration to achieve the goals that they've set out? 2023 is already gone. Before you know it, there's going to be an election year, and you don't know how much productivity you're going to get. But I think we've only got 2024 and maybe 2025. You can throw in 2026. But Dr. Beke, very briefly, are you optimistic that enough Nigerians can see change within the few years that we got for this administration?
Yeah, I will be very brief. I'm very, very optimistic. We have seen major U-turn in the way policies are thought through and discussed, right, in the recent period. So I'm very optimistic. I think the direction of travel has been set. We know what is the ultimate goal of monetary policy, finally. We know what in the Ministry of Finance and Trade and what they are trying to do. So the direction of travel has been set, and it's pretty much in line with our own recommendations. So I'm very optimistic. Now, I think the ultimate step that is still needed a little bit of clarity is just to clarify what the anchors are, right? So we know the direction. Now we need to put there the different anchors. What is the anchor for monetary policy? What is the nominal anchor? We talk about inflation targeting. We want to converge to what level, right? And what is the period of time that will be needed to converge to that nominal anchor? On the Naira, I think you hear the central bank. We're no longer talking about central bank intervening or moral suasion. I think there is a fundamental shift also in the way they're looking at the exchange rate as a shock absorber, right? So what is the policy going forward there? Maybe the central bank will be more reserved, or will focus more on, smoothing out excess volatility rather than determining the rate. And I think the central bank governor is also committing to that. On fiscal policy, where we're going in terms of revenues, you hear the Minister of Finance, you hear the head of the Presidential Committee on Tax Policy and Fiscal Policy. I think what is the nominal anchor there? Where do you want to go? And they have this ambitious plan for revenue mobilization. I think, just to summarize, the direction is there, clarity on a few nominal anchors to policies, but I'm very, very optimistic about Nigeria.
All right, we have a very optimistic there. Alexina, where are you?
I agree, but I think a lot will depend on the policymakers sort of really having the courage of their convictions, in a sense, sticking with it and continuing with implementation. And part of that anchoring that I think Christian is referring to also has to do with communication, and creating as much solid communication and clarity as possible, so that Nigeria as a whole has a good understanding of the direction that things are going in, why difficult decisions have been taken that have create important challenges in the near term, but are absolutely critical to steer the economy onto a much better course that is ultimately better for everyone in terms of jobs, incomes, anti-poverty.
Thank you for that. Dr. Sassi, where are you? What's your temperature on how things could turn out?
Well, I'm optimistic, but it's a race against time. So we've seen the signaling, but things need to happen a bit faster. Political commitment has to be stronger. There has to be action and communication. So we need to have those conversations, but those conversations need to be backed by action. There has to be better communication. And finally, I think it's just bringing the big picture issues about how to keep the vulnerable groups at the center of this, in terms of what sort of social protection conversations do we need to have so that we don't lose an entire segment of the economy while trying to race towards inclusive economic growth.
Thank you. Does anyone want to guess Dr. Sagagi's what he feels about the terms of time? Dr. Sagagi, we're going to round up with you. How do you feel? Are you optimistic? Are you cautiously optimistic? Or how do you see things going?
Very, very optimistic. Very optimistic. I think that once we begin to look for the light in moments of darkness, then obviously one would have to be optimistic. But for us to justify that optimism, we have to do quite a number of things. The government must agree on the agenda, the transformation agenda. I think what happens now is that we have too many documents that speak of transformation agenda. We have to come to agreement as to what the agenda would look like. And more importantly, we have to build trust and confidence in the economy, not only the foreign investors, but also the citizens like us. The government is doing all the talk around foreign exchange and so on. I mean, there are technical issues surrounding that, but I think partially part of the problem is that people do not trust their currency, and people do not trust the government that governs them. So if you don't trust, you are holding some other currency just in case, if you know what I mean. So you have to build trust, and you have to stabilize the economy in the short run, just like you have outlined. But honestly, I think that we have started well, and I think the message the government is putting forward is that in spite of all the difficulties that we face, the ones that I mentioned at the beginning, that the tough and overwhelming conditions, in spite of all that, we are willing to take this country forward, although there are difficult things. Like someone just mentioned, communication is key. Tell the citizens what exactly you are doing, and don't focus on this thing about in the long run we are going to do this and that. I think what matters is for us, for the citizens, the short run is as key, as important as what happens in the long run. Like Ken said, in the long run we are all dead, and so focus on what you are able to put on the table today. And I am confident that we are going to turn the corner by 2025, 2026. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Round of applause, please, for our awesome panel. Thank you all for a very, very informative discussion. To round things up, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call on my gym inspiration, Mr. Dr. Tayo Aduloju, who is the CEO of the NESG, for his closing remarks.
In another forum, I'll explain what that means. Well, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panel, can you give them another hand? I think interrogating what has been a very complex set of conversations, but exciting, because we had hoped that what this event would do for Nigerians and business was, as we presented the signal on the outlook, it would allow business leaders, boards, and business executives to take cue. I think that in that regard, the panel has been phenomenal in making sure that those cues are there. I want to also thank, of course, our special keynote speaker this morning, the central bank governor. You know, he wanted to be here physically, and it was just impossible to make it. And so you could see that he was geared to deliver a very clear set of messages. I think messages are important in 2024. Policy strategic communications as a national imperative will be critical at the inflection points. It will be critical for what we call, most of all call forward guidance. And I think the biggest message coming out of the room today is, yes, economic transformation is possible. We can follow a roadmap. The sequencing and the phasing of that transformation is important, but in each phase, we must be able to mobilize fiscal, monetary, trade, investment, policy actors to provide comprehensive, coherent, sequenced, well-bundled forward guidance that will reduce the anxiety, increase the confidence, and to do so whilst, like Dr. Susuya has argued this morning vehemently, carrying the social conditions along. The fact is, anywhere in the world where the kinds of structural and cyclic dimensions undergo radical transformation, pro-poor policies must come along. But they must come along in such a way that they themselves are accountable, transparent, and the efficiencies for distributing social protection reaches those that need it the most. It's these things that must come together to birth the stabilization effect. We call on our colleagues, regulators, policymakers, so please let's come together and possibly blueprint the stabilization plan. What should the next 12, 13 months look like? NESG is available to convey and support that, because a clear, well-articulated stabilization economic framework that brings all these elements we've discussed together will provide that clear forward guidance that markets can take you from. And then Dr. Sagagi's point as to which extreme we should avoid will have been catered for in terms of giving forward sub-guidance also to market regulators. I think that will take us to where we need to go. The general tone of this event has been optimism, 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 and we want to encourage Nigerians to engage and to believe that the government and the country we own and serve is able to deliver on this agenda, but we'll do it together. Last is accountability. You can be sure that the NESG will continue to hold all stakeholders, including ourselves in the private sector, accountable for our part on this journey. So once again, on behalf of the chairman, the board of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, and members and community, we want to thank you for a great time, a great event. And thank you. The online audience stayed with us, throughout, aptly engaging and sending us messages, and also to our distinguished moderator for navigating a very difficult set of conversations. Let's give him a hand. Have a beautiful rest of the day, end of the month, and see you soon. So can we take some pictures of the panel, and then I think we've closed. Have a good day, guys.